The winds are already sucking the water out of Tampa Bay. This is surreal to see. The water should be going that way, right? But instead, look, the current is going that way, pulling it out into the bay and into the Gulf. This sets up potential catastrophic flooding for later on tonight when Irma hits. A huge surge because the water is being sucked out and then it will come crashing back. See this sand? Yeah, a few hours ago, this was all water, several feet of water, so it's all being sucked out. I also want to talk about why Tampa is so vulnerable to this. They haven't had a hurricane here in nearly 100 years. 1921 was the last time they had a hurricane here. There were only 135,000 people that lived in this area. Now it's nearly 3 million people. The World Bank did a study several years ago saying Tampa is one of the most vulnerable cities in the world, number 7 in the world, for how much damage there will be for a hurricane like this. And here's why. It's a low-lying area. A low-lying area with lots of roads like this. This is a road right over here. And can you imagine how that's going to be cut off so quickly during Irma tonight when the flooding comes in? I want to show you a bridge. Look at all these homes over here. All these apartment buildings right here at sea level. All the way out there, Bill. Can you get that out there? It's far, but there are a lot of bridges like that, Kate, that are very, very low-lying. That's what Tampa looks like, surrounded by water. You got the Gulf, you got Tampa Bay, and now you have all this water going out that will get forced right back in with violence tonight, and that's why it's going to be a very scary night for a lot of people here.
You can see now that the rain is coming in as we're into the outer bands of the storm. And while I've still got this amazing visual, I want to show you this phenomenon here. We're looking into the Hillsborough Bay. It's one of the connected bodies of water to Tampa Bay. And you see all of that dry land out there. That is because of all of the water that is drawn back into the storm surge, this harbinger of what is going to come. Ultimately, the storm surge is going to push in this direction. And just because of the way Tampa Bay and the connected bodies of water are formed, when that water comes back in and comes back with such force, it's got nowhere to go. It's going to push up into the low-lying areas, into all the tributaries, and that's going to create the flooding effect that so many people are worried about, and that's going to happen after the wind event. But as long as we've got the rain and the wind coming in, I want to take you up here to the boulevard here, to Bayshore Boulevard, because then you can kind of get the visual effect of the sheets of rain that are now pouring in. I'm reluctant to say that you have flooding now because you've got water on the road, but that's water on the road that's a result of the rain that's coming in. That's not the flooding that has the authorities out here fearful. The flooding that everyone's talking about is what's going to come from this storm surge.
We want to bring in now Jonathan Bigliotti. He's in Naples on the west coast of Florida. Jonathan, your colleague Chris Van Cleve, I just noticed, tweeted out that the airport there is clocking in 110 mile-per-hour winds. Tell me what you're seeing.
Yeah, and right now you're seeing an image from our camera. Because of those high winds, we decided that it was probably safest to take shelter inside the shelter that we're riding out this storm. And there's about 500 people doing the same exact thing as us, all of them evacuees. As you look at this video and why we wanted to show it to you, we've been talking about the wind, obviously, but also this storm surge. And you can see from these images the water that is rolling into where we are right now. This is, in effect, the early beginnings of this storm surge. We are, keep in mind, about 2.5 miles inland. We are not by the coast at this point. We were at the coast earlier. They are expecting to get anywhere from 10 to 15 feet of a surge. So you can imagine just looking at where we are right now, the kind of water we're getting. I'm really worried about the people that are there on the coast, those that we've spoken with that said they were going to ride out the storm in their homes. Officials have long warned that if, in fact, these surges do get to 15 feet, they could cover entire homes. And from what we're seeing here, as far away as we are from the coast, that is something that is very concerning at this hour, as this storm is still has not fully made impact here in Naples. We're still expecting the worst yet to come.
Jonathan, that's a good thing that you and the crew, the entire crew, decided to move further inland because it is extremely dangerous. I understand the eye wall is moving now over downtown Naples. If you could, for us, as best as you can, describe what it's like just to be in those elements right there. We know you can't report in it right now because you're taking shelter, but I'm sure you were out there before those winds really picked up. Is it tough to sort of like just keep your bearings?
Yeah, I mean, we were outside last we spoke to you. It was just about 100 miles per hour. I mean, that is intense wind. We were by a pretty sturdy railing that at times when those gusts really picked up, we had to hold on to. I can't imagine anyone being out in this weather, to be quite honest. We had a pretty secure spot, but this is why emergency vehicles have been pulled off the road. It's just too dangerous. The wind can topple over cars, but not only that, we have heard countless reports of trees down, and these are just the early reports that are coming in because cell service is really hard. It's really patchy for communication. So you can imagine what the roadways look like, what the streets look like, and just being outside, there is this concern, obviously, of debris flying everywhere. We see it with the trees where we are right now. This facility in the complex that we're on has been pretty much cleared out of any kind of object that could cause damage. But in other areas in downtown where you don't necessarily have people bringing everything in before they're evacuating, you can imagine those things being lifted up by this wind and tossed around. And that's going to be a huge part of the destruction that's going to be caused as we get out on the roads tomorrow safely once the storm has passed.
Jonathan, I'm curious about the shelter that you're at. I know the governor had warned people, well, find shelter, but you need to bring your own food, you need to bring your own medicine, your own bedding. Is that the case at the shelter where you're at?
That's correct. So there's two kinds of shelters. There's the county shelters, the government shelters that were set up, and 30 of those exist, and about 15,000 people are staying inside there. But as the evacuation zone continued to grow, and it continued to grow up until yesterday, and you can imagine the sense of panic that started then, a lot of the people that were kind of waiting this out and thinking that maybe, we can stay inside our own homes, they realized that wasn't the case. And so private shelters started to open up. We are on a golf course who was nice enough to open their doors to people who live in this community and to the general public. And it's these kinds of lifelines that are really helping people out right now, those that would otherwise be in their homes. And if you haven't gone through a storm like this and you're watching this and you're feeling, the pounding on the windows, it's a pretty terrifying experience. Most people do have to bring their own stuff and they do that. We are in, Naples, for those who don't know it, there is a big senior population and a lot of seniors are seeking out these shelters, but we're also hearing stories of seniors that were reluctant and would not leave their homes. And that's a big population that we're going to have to keep a close eye on tomorrow because we were told by several people that we interviewed, they went door to door to their neighbors that they knew were elderly that were reluctant to leave and ended up not leaving. So that is going to be a big concern, I think, tomorrow once this coast is literally clear, when crews start going in and really getting a full grasp of the destruction that was caused here.
And Jonathan, that's what I wanted to talk about, because it's not just the elderly population, Rena, that can be stubborn when storms, I should say, come like this. It's many Floridians who say, we've survived Hurricane Andrew and many of the others. We're going to stick around. We're going to protect our homes. What are they saying to you?
And I'll tell you, as a Floridian who's lived through it, this is just so different because that cone expanded through the entire state.
Oh, totally.
And that's why we sort of felt we could hunker down until we realized Category 5 is completely different.
Yeah, and especially being that what Florida, when you talk about the width of it, it's just 140 miles, but the system here, the big storm was 300 miles across. So I get that, but you still have people who are choosing to stick around. I'm like, bro, move, run.
And that's correct. I lived in Miami for 5 years myself, so maybe I'm one of those stubborn people. And I've run into plenty of them myself here during this storm. One of them, very much along the lines of what you just described. He was 5 blocks away from the Gulf, 5 blocks in a one-story home. And we went there yesterday in the afternoon as the evacuation zone was already growing, and he was still putting up plywood on his house, insistent that he was going to ride this storm out. I asked him if he was crazy. I think I told this story on CBSN yesterday. I was like, are you crazy? And because as he continued to describe this storm, you could see that even though he was reluctant to leave, even defiant to leave, you could see the fear in his eyes. And the good news is actually we learned this today. After telling him he should leave, he ended up ultimately actually leaving. He got in the car and he safely evacuated. So he is safe and sound riding out this storm somewhere where its water hopefully won't reach him. But, you know, for every stubborn person like that changes their mind, there are also others that have not. There was another guy that I spoke with on the street yesterday. The town was boarded up. He was walking around. You could tell, he described it as eerie. I said, why aren't you leaving? He said, you know, we're just going to stay here. We're going to go and have breakfast and reassess. I thought for sure he would have reassessed and said, okay, we're leaving. Yeah. But no, he ended up, we communicated with him again today. He stayed put. And, you know, that was before this storm came in. He said the bathroom was going to be his war room. That is where a number of people that we have spoken with said that they are going to be riding out this storm. And so I hope that he is safe. I know that he is also very close to the Gulf. So this is it really is a scary situation for people like himself who chose to stay put.
And we talk about Florida residents, but it's not just, you know, Florida is a huge tourism hub. And as it makes its way up north, you head to Tampa, the port of Tampa, there are plenty of cruise ships in that port right now. And they've announced that these cruise ships will not be, as you can imagine, taking off. So if you've got tickets to go somewhere down to the Bahamas, obviously you probably have rethought that out a little bit, but they're not letting those cruise ships come out this week. I think at least until Wednesday is what I last heard. Are you seeing tourists, Jonathan, who have found themselves stranded in Florida?
You know, we're not running into too many tourists. Everybody I've spoken with has pretty much been local. This is a really